Time for a break from our show to pay the bills. Check out beacons.ai/comics fund profit for all the C4 FAP links you could ever need, all in one place. You can provide feedback, listen, support, share, enjoy these. We have our Patreon there. You can buy us a beer or a coffee. You can check out our Instagrams, our Twitters, our Facebooks. Check out our YouTube page. You can email us. You can listen to our podcasts on Patreon, if you're a subscriber, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on Podbean. We have Google Podcasts on there. We have an Amazon wish list. You want to buy Kyle and I something? Fine. You can do that here. We appreciate it. We have Kyle's RPG podcast listed on there, so you can check out his Dork Day afternoon offerings. We have Cowabunga links, so you can check out the Cowabunga deep discount FOC and pre-order list. Get on that. That's RLCS, so you can check that out as well. And we want to just give you opportunities to say hi, to check out what we're doing, support us if you would like, or just listen. Check out beacons.ai/comics fund profit for all the C4 FAP links you could ever need. Thanks. Back to the show.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing writer Melissa F. Olson. She is here to promote her first comic book series, Archaic. This 5-part limited series is from Ahoy Comics. The first issue comes out on December 4th. Melissa, welcome to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you. I am so excited to be here, and I'm doing well today. It is autumn in Wisconsin, which is actually like shockingly beautiful. October is my favorite month because I love spooky season. I'm wearing my Dracula t-shirt today, and
Nice.
I absolutely love the fall colors and the crisp weather and Halloween next week as we're recording this.
Oh, that is so nice. That is so cool. All right. So, listeners, I just want to give you guys a little bit background about Melissa. You know, she was and Melissa, please feel free to correct me at any time. So,
Okay,
don't
got it.
worry. So now from the press release from Hannah Bahedri, Melissa was a writing teacher, English professor, and a TEDx presenter, if I got that correct.
Yes.
Okay, she has written the following: the Old World series. Now, there are 13 novels in this series. Melissa, may I ask if you can briefly tell our listeners, what is this series about?
Sure. The Old World books were actually my kind of first venture into writing. The first book, Dead Spots, is about a young woman who nullifies all the magic around her. So it's, set in a typical urban fantasy world where there's vampires and werewolves. And if any of them get very close to the main character physically, they become human again. And when she moves away, then they become what they were, a vampire or werewolf. So this ends up making this young woman who has no like martial arts skills or weapons training. She's a college dropout, but she's so valuable to and also so hated in this world of magic because she can take it away just by being there.
Oh, that sounds so cool. That sounds very interesting because I've never heard of that. Um,
Yeah, when I started writing it, I had never really wanted to write an urban fantasy because that's what I read for fun, and I just kind of said I'll only write it if I can think of an idea that I haven't seen before.
yes.
And when I came up with the idea of the null, I was like, well, that's really fun. Gosh, I guess I better learn how to write novels so that I can make this happen. And, 12 books later, I've built out all these different worlds in Los Angeles and in Boulder, Colorado. Right now I'm working on a Patreon exclusive that's set in
Nice.
Las Vegas. So, it's really grown as I've grown as,
Yes.
a professional. So I still love it very much, even though I have more of a foot in comics right now.
No, but that's great. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, Melissa. I'm going to continue on.
Yeah.
You have written a Lena Dane mystery that came out in 2014 called The Big Keep.
Hmm.
And you've also written the Nightshade series. Um,
Yeah, that's like a
mhm.
supernatural procedural. Um, it's a novella series that I wrote, a trilogy that I wrote for Tor.com when they first started doing novellas.
Yes.
And, I, at the time I was like, I've read all these books about what happens, 15 years, 50 years after vampires, the world finds out that vampires are real.
Mhm.
Or I've read books where the world doesn't know that magic is real. But what about like the 5 minutes after we find out that there are vampires? And
Oh,
so I wanted to write a story about the first like government agency that's put in track or in charge
mhm.
of tracking vampires. So very on brand for me to figure out a way to bring vampires into it.
Oh, that's so cool. But I love the idea of, like you said, you know, dealing with like the first 5 minutes of the world
Right
discovering
after, yeah.
because that, oh, it's,
Well, and
mhm.
especially, now like the kind of thesis that I have in those books is that for like 2 days, that's all anybody would talk about. Vampires are real. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Mhm.
And then by day 3, everybody would just go back to their lives.
Yeah.
And it would be something that nobody really wanted to think about.
Mhm.
When there's a disaster on the other side of the world,
Yeah.
we all, read about it and talk about it for a couple of days. And then we kind of have to go back to putting one foot in front of the other.
Yes.
And it just sort of slides out of our public awareness.
Yes.
And I kind of think that's what would happen if we found out that magic was real or
Mhm.
vampires were real, is like 3 days in, it would be like, yes, but there's rent to pay, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about it.
Yeah. But that sounds so cool. I have to check that out. I really do. Okay, I'm sorry. So, all right. And then, like you said, you have a foothold in comics right now. Now, your first work in comics was a short story, actually in another Ahoy limited series, from Project Cryptid called The Tale Tour. Hopefully I said that correctly. And I want to say, I think that was in issue 11, if I remember. I could be wrong.
Oh,
Or,
I actually can't remember. It came out in January.
uh-huh.
It was my comics debut.
Yes.
Um where I live in I'm from originally the Northwoods of Wisconsin,
Mm-hmm.
and that is lumberjack territory. So
Mm-hmm.
the town where I grew up was founded as a lumberjack camp,
Mm-hmm.
like most towns in northern Wisconsin. And lumberjacks used to tell tales around the campfire,
Mm-hmm.
and they were called tall tales. And,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up learning about Paul Bunyan, who is the tall tale.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it in school, to Paul Bunyan. There's a Paul Bunyan like park in the town next to mine. So I've
Mm-hmm.
never not known about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when Ahoy was doing this project Cryptid,
Mm-hmm.
I pitched doing a story about the hodag, which is one of the fearsome critters that Paul
Mm-hmm.
Bunyan faces in his like adventures.
Mm-hmm.
And the town of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, is famous for hodags. That's their high school football mascot.
Mm-hmm.
It's the statues that are all over town are
Mm-hmm.
hodag statues. They are so like into it. And so I wrote this short story that was kind of about what's the value of that today? Like, why do we still care about why are there still hodag tours? Is it
Mm-hmm.
just, for a cash grab?
Mm-hmm.
Which, it can kind of feel like it sometimes
Yeah.
when you are there. But also like where did these stories were really originally like a warning to
Mm-hmm.
don't go into the woods at night alone.
Yeah. Yes.
So I had fun just telling the story of this family, most of whom are jerks,
Mm-hmm.
who are on a hodag tour and not very respectful of the legend and
Yeah.
kind of what
Yes.
happens to them because of that disrespect.
Oh, that's very good. That's very creepy.
Yeah,
Ah,
I hope that it's a good balance of kind of the creepy thing, but also the sort of fun of these stories. The
yes.
tall tales there was always a lesson,
Yes.
but often the lesson was let's haze the newest lumberjack.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so quick example, one of the other fearsome critters is called the tea kettler. And he's a monster that, of course, kills you. But before he does, he makes this high-pitched whistling noise like a
Mm-hmm.
tea kettle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the lumberjacks would be sitting around the campfire telling these stories. And of course, there would be one of them off in the woods with
Yes.
a little fire and a tea
Yeah.
kettle. Because a lot of the point was to scare the crap out of the newest
Yeah.
lumberjack.
It's
So
yes.
you'd hear this story, and then all of a sudden, off in the woods in the dark at night, would
Mm-hmm.
be this tea kettle noise,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So, there's sort of like a lot of fun and mischievousness
Yes.
about those tales,
Yeah.
but also, it's 2024 and we're still talking about them. So I wanted to kind of look at why.
Mm-hmm. Ah, okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay. So listeners, one last thing I wanted to add about Melissa is that you may have seen her at conventions such as Dragon Con as either a panelist or as a moderator. Um so um so so how long have you been doing, how long this is an off the cuff question, but how long have you been like doing these panels or being moderator at convention?
Yeah, I've been doing conventions as long as I've been writing, which is
Hmm.
about 13 years.
Hmm.
And being an urban fantasy author, that's one of the genres that is well represented at conventions. If the con has a writer's track,
Yes.
then urban fantasy is the kind of thing you can talk about. And
Hmm.
at first, I used to go to like local, smaller cons,
Yes.
but over the years, partly because of the pandemic,
Hmm.
and the economy, conventions have really shrunk.
Hmm.
There's no longer for example, there used to be 3 annual conventions here in Madison, and now there are none.
Oh no.
Um,
Sorry. Yeah.
so yeah, we've really kind of lost the small convention
Hmm.
at the moment. But I love doing them because, being a writer, especially a fiction writer, you kind of go and into a room for 5, 6 months, work
Hmm.
on one project,
Hmm.
uh, don't really talk to anybody. I wouldn't like put on makeup or
Hmm.
pants with a zipper for like the entire
Hmm.
time that I was writing. And then it felt so good to go out in the world and talk about what I do.
Hmm.
Because writers, it's not like there's a water cooler where we go and chat on our lunch break.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of a very isolated job. And
Hmm.
so I started doing it for that and to promote my work.
Hmm.
And I just kind of love them. So Dragon Con you mentioned, and that
Hmm.
is I consider that my home con now, even though it's 1,000 miles away.
Hmm.
Dragon Con is the only big con that I know of that has a dedicated urban fantasy track. So you go and you can go to panels on nothing but urban fantasy for
Hmm.
4 straight days if you want.
Oh, that's nice.
Um,
Yeah.
and I just love it because, so many of my colleagues are there. I see the same people every year and meet new people too.
Hmm.
So I really love it. And I love that now, even though I'm writing comics now, I still go to Dragon Con and I can speak on the comics track
That's right.
and I can
Yes.
speak on the urban fantasy track.
Oh, that's
So
great.
it's been fun to get to sort of have more
Hmm.
than one hat to wear at
Yes.
this big con.
Okay. All right. Melissa, thank you for talking to me about, what you do, is there anything, please feel free, is there anything I missed or something that you want listeners to, check out, any of your past works or anything like that?
Obviously, I love when people buy any of my
Yeah.
books,
Mhm.
but I will just say, I've been using the term urban fantasy a lot. And that's one of those terms that has a bit of confusion around it because it doesn't really mean how it sounds. It's not stories that are set in a big city
Yeah. Hmm.
necessarily.
Yes.
It's more, I think of it like a Venn diagram where
Hmm.
you have a world of reality and then you have a world of magic. And an urban fantasy is about where those two things overlap.
Hmm.
Um, and how that edge or that border is kind of maintained or not maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is kind of fun is that one of the through lines of my work, which seems like it's all over the place, but even Archaic, my comic book, is an urban fantasy. It is about a
Yes.
woman who has real world, everyday problems,
Yes.
but also there's magical creatures and beings vying for her attention now. So I'm still writing urban fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
13 years later. It's just kind of a different format.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before we get into Archaic, couple things. I just want to give a big shout out to Hannah Bahedri of Superfan Promotions. Hannah, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. Thank you for setting up this interview and providing me with an advanced copy of Archaic #1. Melissa, I'm gonna ask, would you like to add anything to that?
I love you, Hannah. I love you so much. No, Hannah has been magnificent. It's so great to be able to talk about and promote my work. I have to say though, you are actually the very first person I've talked to who's gotten to read the issue. I've done a few different interviews and podcast things, but I haven't actually gotten to speak to anybody who's read the book. So it was
Mhm.
all kind of like teasing,
Mhm.
what's going to happen. So I'm excited to answer questions that are about the specific first issue. So Hannah, thank you for setting that up. And thank you to Superfan for, making me one of your superfans.
No, thank you very much. All right. Now, before we jump into Archaic, where can listeners follow you on social media, or do you have a website or?
Yeah, my website is just my name, melissafolson, .com. And I'm on all the socials, probably a little too much and also somehow not enough. That's the way it
Mhm.
always feels with
Yeah.
promoting yourself on social media. I'm very into Blue Sky right now. That's
Yes.
that's
Yes.
probably my favorite because when I signed up, of all the different social medias, I started on Blue Sky as a comics writer, not
Oh, okay.
like with Twitter or Instagram. When I joined those platforms, I wrote fiction. So
Mm-hmm.
the people that I followed were fiction writers, and the people that I interacted with were fiction writers.
Mm-hmm.
Where on Blue Sky, I signed up as a comics writer and started following comics people. So
Yes.
I think that's part of why I'm having so much fun there right now, talking about the work that I'm doing today.
Oh, okay. All right, Melissa, thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna say let's just jump right in.
Yes.
Archaic. You already teased what the story is, a little bit about the story, what the story is about. But is there anything else you want to add about what is this whole story about? You already added it's like a little bit of the urban fantasy and
Yeah.
so forth.
So and this is kind of a memorized line because this is the one that I had to use when I was trying to find a home for the
Mhm.
comic at a publisher. And it's about a sentient island that
Mhm.
serves as a kind of game preserve for the gods and legends of dead cultures. And then,
Mhm.
the single mom who's gets put in charge of it
Mhm.
without knowing anything about why.
Okay. Before we start jumping into characters, how did you come up with this story about a sentient island? Basically, maybe not dead gods, but maybe like forgotten gods or gods that
Yeah.
were like at once was considered powerful back in their time, but now it's like they're almost like they're part of fiction. They're almost like part of fiction now, or
Yeah. Yeah.
they're watered down. They're power.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've spoken about this a little bit elsewhere, but during the pandemic,
Mhm.
things got kind of dark for me in 2021, like the winter of 2020 to 2021. I got divorced, and my kids, I have two children who are both on the autism spectrum, and they are, a lot like kind of my life and my heart and
Mhm.
everything. And for the first time, they were leaving to go to their dad's, because he lived somewhere else now, and they were going there for days
Yeah.
at a time.
Yes.
And so I had gone from taking care of all this different stuff. And of course, during lockdown, You know,
Yes.
you're with your kids 24/7. It's all about them. And so all of a sudden I'm alone in this big empty house, and I don't have anyone to take care of. And at the same time that was happening, a lot of people were kind of re-examining their lives. You know, a lot of people quit their job or started new hobbies or, you know, new trends or activities during that time. And I was kind of looking at my life a little bit like, okay, wait a minute. If I'm not a mom this week, what is the point of me? And I, you know, kind of felt sort of like passed over, like nobody needed me anymore. What's the point? And that's an idea that was kind of interesting to me. Like the way I think by then, of course, is to take whatever's going on in my life and think, yeah, but what's the magic version of this?
Yeah, yes.
And so, you know, and I started to think about all these different cultures and civilizations over time. And by the way, I am conscious that the word culture and the word civilization are themselves problematic from an anthropology perspective, because the people who chose whether or not certain communities counted as a civilization were like white English speakers. So I don't like those words. I just have not figured out another way to talk about it yet. So I am mindful of that. You got to be careful with the word civilization, because white people should not be the ones that get to dictate that. But I was looking at like ancient Mesopotamia, for example, and a lot of these different communities sort of would be it was a very they lived in a very desirable place from an agricultural perspective, and so they were constantly being invaded and sort of assimilated into a new culture, and that kept happening. And when that kept happening, some of the religious icons and the gods and the legends, some of them adapted and you know, became part of the next thing, but some of them sort of just fell out of the conversation. And that was very interesting to me, you know, and I started to think about in a more fictional sense, like what would an immortal creature do when everybody that's ever worshipped them is gone?
Yes.
Like every single human who's ever really cared about them, you know, and gone to their temples and sacrificed to them
Yes.
and prayed to them, like they're gone. And maybe their name is still known in certain places, but they don't have a job to do anymore. And that really resonated with me, because I felt like at that time I didn't really have a job to do.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was the kind of first thing. But what brought it together was, you know, during this time, I didn't have much to write because it was not a great time for writers. And I would fall down a lot of Wikipedia rabbit holes. I'm famous for Wikipedia rabbit holes, because that's, you know, one of the things I love about writing urban fantasy is you get to use a lot of history, but you don't need to check your sources. Like you can write a story about a haunted brothel in Denver, and it's okay if it's not the right, like located on the right block, because it's fiction. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That kind of thing. So Wikipedia is actually perfect for me as a source, because it's got the anecdotes, even if you can't 100% check all of the facts. So I fell down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, and I started reading about islands that disappear and reappear, which is something that you find. The phenomenon is called a phantom island, and it's located in a whole bunch of fiction and historical documents. There are accounts of an island off the coast of Newfoundland that called the Isle of Demons, where this in real life, this really happened. This young woman was lost. Allegedly, she was thrown off a ship for having an affair with one of the sailors. And she and the sailor were both marooned on an island, and along with her maid, because you know, you have to have your maid when you get that. Her maid did nothing wrong, by the way, and got marooned on the island. And this really happened, where this young woman was marooned, and years later, a different ship picked her up.
Uh-huh.
And at that point, the sailor was gone, the
Mm-hmm.
maid was gone,
Mm-hmm.
was just her. And they could tell that the doctors who examined her could tell, even this was, I think, the 1700s, that she had given birth at some
Mm-hmm.
point.
Oh.
And she came back and she actually became a favorite of the current queen. And it became this, and you know, she would tell stories about her time on this island, and
Mm-hmm.
she would say, you know, there was screaming every night. Like
Oh.
there were monsters all over the
Yes. Mm-hmm.
island, and they screamed and screamed. And it was, I'm sure that she was embellishing the story, you
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, there are certain things that could have caused that. It could have been the kind of thing where there were sea caves that made noises at night.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
right.
that's very possible.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that's a and when they sent expeditions back to check out this island, they could never find it again.
Yes. Oh. Mm-hmm.
Now, most likely it was because, you know, somebody got directions wrong.
Yeah.
Either either the captain who originally marooned her
Mm-hmm.
or she herself, they, you know, couldn't get it right for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
But like that story is just one phantom island that, you know, there are many throughout you know, the long history of humans telling stories. So I really kind of got interested in combining these two ideas. The idea of these cultures that
Mm-hmm.
have monsters or immortal
Yes.
creatures of some kind that have nowhere to be and
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do. And
Yes.
also this island that can appear and reappear
Yes.
or possibly move or
Mm-hmm.
possibly only appears at certain you know, there's the old story about Brigadoon,
Mm-hmm.
the island in the mist that only appears, you know, every so many years.
Oh,
So
yes. Mm-hmm.
that's that's kind of where I started, is
Mm-hmm.
with these two ideas. But as an urban fantasy writer, I knew that I still really only had a really cool setting. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I hadn't
Yes.
actually built anything for a story yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I put someone in charge of the island who didn't know anything about it and had no experience, wasn't really a history
Mm-hmm.
person. And
Yes.
that's how I came up with Tess,
Yes.
Tess Halliday, who is the main character of the book.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this sounds so cool. Um, Off the cuff, I love how you created this island. The other thing I love too is that, like you already talked about, like the old gods, where do these creatures go? But you know what is kind of nice is that I just thought about, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a safe haven for them. They find a
Yeah.
community. They're no
So,
longer there's no longer some type of creature, mythological creature, or a god in Africa,
yeah,
in the middle of Africa. There is no mythological creature that's in the middle of, Alaska or something. Now it's
right.
yeah.
You're absolutely right. So, when I made the island, and I just want to mention, so this was like I was writing this book years before Disney released Encanto, but
Oh,
you
okay.
know, only just a couple of months ago. So, you know, the entire series is written and we're in production on issue 4 right now. But just a couple months ago, my daughter was asking me about the comic book, and I was explaining, well, actually, the island can
Mhm,
think and
mhm.
she can make decisions and she can move parts of herself around. Like she can make a
Yes.
new mountain or a
Yeah.
new lake. And she's like, oh, so it's the house from Encanto. And I'm like, oh, damn it, it is the house from Encanto. You know, I was developing this,
Yeah.
I'm sure probably parallel, but you know, it was very annoying to have put all this thought into
Mhm.
having this sentient island and then having my kid just be like, "Oh yeah, mom, just say the house from Encanto." Um, but so the island, her name is Demonde,
Oh,
and I chose that word because, well, I made that up because there's some French influences on the story. Some
okay.
of the ancestors are French, and in French, and I'm gonna pronounce this wrong because I took Spanish like a normal person, but demode is like it means like forgotten world, forgotten things.
Mhm.
And then I added an extra N in there to make it Demonde,
Mm-hmm.
because then when you look at that in writing, it looks like demon. And I
Yes,
thought
yeah.
that was really fun. So the island's name is Demonde, and
Mhm.
she has an attitude.
Ah,
She's a control freak.
uh-huh.
Um, if you like could control every single thing on your body, make your hair change, make your
Mhm.
eyes change, make, your physical form change any way you wanted,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you woke up one morning with a giant zit, that would
Mhm.
be very annoying
Yes.
because you would be used to having full control over everything, right?
Mhm.
So Demond is kind of a jerk sometimes. Like she just thinks everybody on her island should do exactly what she wants to do. And yet they're all their own thinking creatures
Yes,
with their
yeah.
own ideas and
Mhm.
motivations. But she's very capable of punishing them if they don't do what she wants. So it is a safe place
Yes.
for these creatures. Nobody on there is ever going to be attacked by
Okay.
anything,
Mhm.
right? In issue 1,
Mhm.
Demond stops a bullet, and that's so easy for her.
Yes,
Uh,
okay. Yeah.
she stops a bullet in midair, and that's
Yes.
nothing for her. She can change magnetic poles.
Mhm.
Like stopping a single bullet is easy.
Mhm.
She is protected by fog that
Mhm. Yes.
makes you sick if you get too close and you don't know
Yes.
you're not part of the family. So you do not have to worry that you'll be attacked. You don't have to worry if you're a human on this island, you're not going to get sick. You're
Mhm.
not going to stub your toe
Mhm.
because she can just move the rocks out of the way.
Yeah.
If you trip over your own shoelaces, as I often do, like she'll catch you.
Mhm.
So it's incredibly safe, but also like you're kind of at the whim of a capricious god
Yes.
because the island itself is kind of her own. It's sort of like a god,
Yes.
that does what she wants,
Mhm.
and she wants you to do what she wants too.
Oh, because it sounds so cool because like you said, she provides a safe haven,
Yeah.
but the price is really high,
Mm-hmm.
you
So,
know.
and you have to think too, like, so I'm sending Tess, my main character. She's a
Yes.
single mom. She
Yes.
has a stepson and twins who
Mhm.
are I think 8 or 9.
Mhm.
And uh for her, and she has been in danger. Prior to the beginning of the story,
Mhm.
her ex-husband made some really bad choices and owes
Yes.
money to some very criminal people in
Mhm.
Chicago. And so Tess has been living off the grid with 3 kids, kind of going from crappy motel to crappy
Yes.
motel, trying to stay ahead of the people who are trying to get their money back from
Yes.
her husband, and think that if they can hurt Tess and the kids, that will
Mhm.
bring him out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And so in in some ways, this entire comic is like single mom wish fulfillment, right? As soon as she hits the island,
Mhm.
every one of her kids is perfectly safe, guaranteed safe from harm.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to remember that I'm writing this during the pandemic,
Mhm.
during lockdown.
Yes.
Is when I was planning it and writing issue 1, when you never felt safe, right? Even though
Mhm.
you were trapped, you
Mhm.
never totally felt safe because
Yeah.
you didn't know how COVID might get through
Yes.
somehow and get to you and make you sick or make your
Mhm.
kids sick. So it's this constant push pull
Mhm.
of safety, but also trapped,
Mhm.
and Tess kind of coming to terms with that is one of the themes of these 5 issues.
Oh, okay, but I'm gonna say because I couple things I'm gonna say is because one scene I have to say we already talked about, but I just want to bring this up is that I love the scene where actually your artist Sally Ca-
Cantorino.
Cantorino. I love the scene because to me there's a panel where it says 3 months later Chicago.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
wedding banquet. You see 2 waiters in the background going, I think that's her. She was married to the governor. What's she doing here? What's she doing working? I love the scene where it's the panel is there, it's there. You have about 5 or 6, there's like 2, 3 cooks, two, three waiters and waitresses, and there's one lady in the foreground carrying a big pan of food. But
Hmm.
the thing I love about that scene is that it Tess is blended in with everybody else.
Yeah.
Because at first I'm going for a second, okay, who's Tess? Who are they talking about?
Right.
And I love it because in some sense, like the island is also sort of well, and now I'm really jumping, making assumptions, but the island is sort of kind of like that, where it kind of sort of it can blend in with the old, like it can
Yeah.
camouflage itself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Tess is a character who she has just been living by this dangling by a thread,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah.
She's she has some training in that she was in the Navy prior to
Hmm.
this. She was a cop in the Navy
Hmm.
before she met her husband, who's now her ex-husband. And so, she has some like physical training and she knows how
Yes.
to use a weapon,
Yes.
but she also has three kids with her,
Yeah. Hmm.
and her ex left them. And
Hmm.
so it's really hard to be off the grid with three kids. And she knows all along that it's really not sustainable and
Hmm.
it's not working. So she's got a buddy from the Navy who hires her as a cater waiter.
Hmm.
She's just waitressing, but she's at this wedding and she's a waitress at the wedding. The bride spots her and gets Tess fired
Oh,
because
that's
you don't want the disgraced former First Lady of Illinois
hmm.
serving your guests food at your
Hmm.
wedding, right? You want the attention on you.
Yeah.
And so like the first time we meet Tess, she's getting fired from like the only way she has to make money and feed her kids.
Yes.
And she gets fired by the bride. She's walking out and her friend has given her this big takeout container of food to like at least take home for the kids because her
Yeah.
friend is
Yes.
a good person and feels bad about having to do
Yeah.
this. So that's when, these gangster figures find
Yes.
Tess
Hmm.
and they're threatening her and they're kind of, trying to beat on her. And the whole time Tess has one eye on this takeout container because
Yes.
that's
Hmm.
her
Yes.
kid's dinner,
Yeah.
you know? And so it was fun. Like one of the tricky things about comics and moving from fiction
Hmm.
where I control everything
Hmm.
into comics where it's a lot more visual is I think that scene is when I first started to play with the idea of like what you're saying with your mouth and what you're focused on are two different things,
Hmm.
and to ask the reader to kind of do a little bit more work of
Hmm.
connecting these dots, and having so it becomes like the the food container is something you kind of start caring about, because
Yes.
that's her kid's dinner.
Yeah.
So like even though Tess is kind of getting her butt kicked,
Hmm.
like she's got this eye on this styrofoam container in a
Yes.
plastic bag, just trying to hope that survives.
Yes.
And so that was really a fun scene to write. As somebody I've written a lot of action scenes, I've written a
Hmm.
lot of fight scenes.
Hmm.
I've never written one where the hostage is your children's dinner.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
what you're kind of worried about, right? Like
Yes.
at that point, Tess has very little concern for herself.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
trying to make sure her kids get to eat tonight.
Yeah. The other thing I love about Tess is, it's not only is she this strong female character, um, because we've already talked about, she's a single mother, she's trying to make
Yeah.
ends meet. Um, the thing I also love about her too is um she's there for her kids. I mean, literally there, because when she comes home, she sees Theo. She was, we got to order pizza. I had
Yeah.
food, it got ruined. And then, she walks into the motel room, and I have to, sorry, I'm kind of blending parts of it, and
It's
we're going
okay.
to
Go
talk
ahead.
about Sally in a little bit, but Sally, your artist, but I love it how she you open up the motel room,
Yeah.
and Sally shows how dingy and dirty it is, but the kids are making it like a fun adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up because, you know, when I wrote the script, and especially first of all, I want to give a shout out to Ahoy and to Sally, because not everybody wants to work with a brand new comics writer. I really grew a lot as a writer between issue 1 and issue 5. I actually took a class in there on how to format a script, because when I wrote issue 1, I really formatted it a lot like a screenplay, which works fine, you know, and it's okay, but there are better ways to do it. And I didn't know that at first, but you know, Sally was, there are artists who wouldn't want to jump on board with somebody who didn't have that experience of being in conversation with an artist. And so I just give them all so much credit for kind of rolling the dice on me. When I wrote the script for that, the scene in the hotel room, which is when we first meet Tess's kids, we first see her with the kids. The thing I was focused on was making those kids realistic. You know, they each have their own personalities. They also have a way of all talking at once. Well, like you're trying to figure out, like, okay, I need to do this thing. And there's like 3 children talking. You know, Tess is like, the bad guys found her. She's got to get everybody out of here. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of trying to pack up a hotel room with children not helping you at the same time, but it is so stressful for a normal situation, much less one where there are bad guys after you. So you've got like all these children talking to her at once. They all have their own needs. When I wrote it, I was really focused on that, and I'm really proud of how it came out. But when I saw Sally's art, I ended up cutting back a lot of my dialogue because Sally was telling it differently. And the thing I always think of is, you know, I had mentioned that they've been living in this hotel room. That was in the script, that, you know, they've been living here and they've got toys and stuff out. But Sally was the one who put in a blanket fort. Like there's this one, in one panel, you see this blanket fort in the hotel room, this crappy flea-bitten hotel room. There's this little, like, somebody has set up a fort with chairs and blankets and stuff. And it's so perfect. It's just the perfect representation of Tess, and to some degree her older stepson, Teo, trying to give these twins a normal experience, trying to let them play and be kids and have fun, even though they're trapped in this terrible, not at all normal situation. And so when Sally put in that tent, I was like, that was a big moment for me of kind of going, I can relax. Like, Sally knows what she's doing. I don't have to, not that I ever intended to micromanage anyone, but that kind of made me go, okay, Sally knows what to do. Sally's got this. So yeah, I love that. They actually released just that scene. The hotel scene is available online, and I'm really proud of that little introduction scene, because that was very hard to learn how to show off who these characters are and like what the kids' personalities are, and to make them individuals who have their own personalities, but also like be continuing the story of, let's go, we got to get out of the hotel, we're in danger, like they may have followed me, something weird happened, we have to get out of here. So I'm, and I had to do all of that in, you know, 2-3 pages. So it was a really fun way to kind of get to experience being a comic writer and working with an artist who is definitely smarter than you.
Well, okay. But it worked well. It was great.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how it came through. You know, the first issue is, there's not that much on the island itself. Because we, you know, there's an opening, it's sort of like a cold open from a TV show on the island, where there's, you know, an accident and one of the monsters on the island kills some people. And that, you know, that's a few pages. And then the most of the first issue is the story of them finding out about the island and getting to the island. When I was working on writing, you know, one of the things I had to kind of ask myself is, what are the conditions under which I would be willing to pack up my whole life on the, you know, on a moment's notice and haul everybody a couple thousand miles away? Like, how desperate would you have to be to do that like instantly, no questions. Let's go. And so a lot of issue 1 is about the process of getting the Halliday family to the island. And so I worried at first that people weren't gonna love it because it's, you know, later we get into these eye-popping things at the island and you meet all these different creatures and different like landscapes. This island has everything. And so I was a little worried that people would find issue 1, you know, not that interesting. But the way that Sally draws Chicago in the winter, and the way that the fight scenes play out where, you know, Tess is being attacked and everything, I just had so much fun with it.
Oh, that's great. I love the first issue because it sets everything up because it's a mystery. Because it's okay,
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
what is this? Okay, what is this island thing? Because I have no idea what the island was.
Yeah.
You know, and then all of a sudden, then we're introduced to Tess, and then it's like, okay, now she has this trouble thing. We know she's a single mom.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, how do you have her take her kids to this island? All of a sudden, this mysterious envelope slips under the door, and it's like, hey, come to this island. And I believe it was a letter from her dad, right?
So
who's a caretaker.
I'm glad you brought that up, especially the mystery aspect. So the way that the island works is it has to have a human caretaker on the island. There needs to be somebody who can sort of, because the island has many skills, but it doesn't speak like in a language that anyone would decipher. And so it needs a human caretaker to kind of serve as almost like a conduit between the regular world and the island. Somebody who can get supplies, right? Because there are some things the island can't make, like microprocessors. And it needs somebody who can speak, who can resolve disputes among the different species that live on this island. So the people who are there's one family that is allowed on the island, and it's Tess's bloodline. Tess never met her biological father. She has no idea who he is. In the opening scenes, before we even meet Tess, we meet her father, Phillip, who is the current caretaker of the island. And the one thing that everyone knows about this island at every step of the way is that the Rockford family, which is their last name, they cannot get hurt on the island. If you are a Rockford, you cannot be injured. That's the rule. It's been that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's the one thing everybody knows. The trustee, the person who inherits this trust that technically on paper owns the island, that person can't be injured. And yet in the opening pages, Phillip is killed on the island. So these 5 issues are held together by one mystery, which is who or what killed Phillip. And I felt very strongly about that. And I actually think that mystery is why this comic book was accepted. You know, when I was talking to the editors at Ahoy, you know, I think Sarah Litt got it right away. But, you know, there were some questions too about like, well, what's the story? Okay, there's this island, there's this single mom, there's her family, sure. But like, what's the story we're telling? And this is one thing where my background was so helpful, because I always say every urban fantasy I've ever written is a mystery. We're always trying to figure out, you know, who murdered that alpha werewolf? Or who's got the vampires all stirred up and hating this other population and creating this conflict? You know, what magic is being used to do this or that? All of my books have a mystery as the spine of the story. And everything that happens is in service of that one mystery. And so my North Star for plotting out this book was this one mystery. So I was able to tell my editors at Ahoy, look, the story is who killed Phillip or what killed Phillip. We don't know. Because that's what an urban fantasy is there's an established world of magic that's in balance. and then something happens that throws that balance off.
Yes, yeah.
So when you write an urban fantasy, you have to establish that baseline of like, this is what the life is like, this is what everybody knows,
Mhm.
and then you got to throw it off.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so that's exactly what I do in this book is everyone knows this family, this bloodline can't be hurt.
Yes.
So how could Philip be murdered?
Yeah.
And every issue, you know, different things happen. They're
Yes.
interacting with mostly the ancient Mesopotamian section of the
Yeah.
island. There's different sections with different cultural influences, but we're mostly in ancient Mesopotamia for these 5 issues. And we're looking at the question of what could have killed Philip. And of course, the prime suspect is the Mesopotamian goddess of the dead, Archaic, who doesn't appear much. I think we just catch a glimpse of her in issue 1.
Yes.
But she becomes a major character in the rest of the series. You know, she's kind of a player in the story because who are you gonna suspect found a
Yes.
way around the rule except the goddess of the dead, right? That's got to be who it is. Maybe could it?
Yeah.
So that's the sort of through line of this story is the plot line is who killed Philip? How did Philip die?
Okay. Sorry, Melissa. Can I have about 5 more? I know my timer went off.
Oh, yeah, no,
Yep.
go for it. I'm fine.
Okay. I'm going to try to wrap this up in maybe about 5, in a few more minutes.
Yeah, no worries.
The thing I just want to point out, you know what I love about, one thing I love about Ahoy comics is they tell very interesting stories, but there's a heart to the story, their stories.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
when you mention about these urban fantasies, it's always, if there's a balance to it, then the story becomes boring. But if there's something thrown off, then it becomes then that's
Yeah.
when the mystery starts. But you know what I love about it, and it was I just realized was when we meet Tess's life is really off balance.
Yeah.
So for her to start going to the island, it's almost like hopefully well, I'm going to say hopefully because I haven't, but how the story's going to end, but hopefully her balance with, her and her kids are going to be balanced out.
Yeah.
You know.
Something that I really haven't talked about anywhere else. I told you that the plot through line of these 5 issues is who killed Philip.
Yes.
The emotional through line, the thing that I had my eye on the whole time is actually the relationship between Tess and her stepson, Teo.
Yes.
Mateo. Because, like I said, everyone of Tess's bloodline is safe
Yes.
on the island.
Oh my God, yes.
Teo doesn't have Tess's blood. He is, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. That is a political call because my do not disturb was only set for an hour.
Oh,
Sorry
okay,
about
that's all
that.
right. It's all right. I didn't even hear that. Don't worry.
Okay. So
actually, you know what, listeners, actually, it was the sentient island texting her.
Yeah,
saying,
don't
stop
talk too
talking.
much about
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Stop,
No,
you're spoiling it.
It's true. I get in so much trouble from her. No, Tess's relationship with Teo is what I had my eye on from the beginning. That because her younger kids, the twins, they are young enough to kind of bounce back from anything, and she's given them this safety and this sense of home and love no matter what. Teo at 15, he's a lot more aware of the fact that mom comes, my stepmom comes home with a black eye sometimes because there are bad guys after my dad, and so he has more awareness of what's going on. And he's kind of resentful of how much responsibility Tess puts on him. She's out trying to scrape together dinner and somebody's watching the twins, and it's him. So the two of them, we see her meet Teo for the first time in issue 2. We get a flashback to their first meeting when he's a toddler. So this is kind of the only mother he remembers, but he has that kind of angsty teenager thing of trying to kind of keep her at a distance. It's the "you're not my real mom" energy comes up a lot. And Tess, for her part, she kind of falls into this trap of relying on him a lot because
Yes.
he's the only one she trusts
Yeah.
to take care of her kids, or
Yes.
to take care of the twins is her older kid.
Mhm.
So, Tess doesn't really see any difference between her stepson and her biological children.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
In her mind, those are her 3 kids.
Yes.
But Teo has a lot of resentment,
Mhm.
and he misses his dad. And
Yes.
so he kind of takes things out on Tess.
Mhm.
So their relationship is the one that I cared most about in writing these 5 issues, is this kind of relationship between Tess
Mhm.
and Teo. The parenting a teenager is complicated,
Mhm.
and being the step parent of a teenager is very complicated. And so to have that relationship, which is very relatable and very, a lot of us have experienced
Mhm.
a step parent stepchild relationship, having it kind of unfold in the middle of like this crazy magical island
Mhm.
was something that was really fun to write, and
Mhm.
gives it an emotional punch that I really wanted the book to have.
Yes, and in the first issue, you established that. It's great. Now I can't wait to read the rest of the series.
Oh, good.
Okay.
I'm glad that comes through. That was one thing where, when I was planning this novel, or this see, I said novel because I'm used to planning novels.
Yes.
And so when I first pitched this book,
Mhm.
I didn't send a 1-page pitch document.
Yeah.
I had a slideshow that was like 20 pages,
Mhm.
and I knew the beginning, middle, end.
Mhm.
I knew so much more than will ever be in the comics because I
Mhm.
come from that background
Yeah.
where you have to be ready to fill any plot hole,
Yes.
and to have an answer for how the
Mhm.
magic works in
Mhm.
any situation.
Mhm.
So, I had pages and pages of material, and I had to like trim it down to pitch the book.
Mhm.
I think that it was really obvious from my first meeting with Sarah Litt, my
Mhm.
editor, that like I knew the island, I knew the powers, I knew
Yes.
the creatures. But, I think it took a while for it to be clear that I had a plan for the emotional part of
Yes.
it, for the family part of it.
Yes.
I really grew up on PG-13 action adventure movies.
Mhm.
Like my happy place is The Mummy, Jurassic Park.
Mhm.
Those sort of uh there's an adventure and there's a
Mhm.
family, and you're worried about both, you're worried about everybody staying alive, but also about them still loving each other at the end.
Mhm.
Um, like that is something that I don't see that much in comic books. I
Yeah.
think comics tend to be either it's for all ages,
Mhm.
or it's like Hellblazer,
Yeah.
and it's
Mhm.
for like ages 18 and up.
Mhm.
Um, so I really wanted to write in that spirit of like, this isn't probably a book that 6-year-olds should read, you
Yeah.
know, but it is a book that 11-year-olds can read.
Yes.
My 11-year-old is going to be allowed to read it when
Mhm.
it comes out in December. And she's, it's the PG-13 level
Mhm. Yes.
of scariness
Yeah.
and intensity. But it also has that, you can tell that I grew up on Steven Spielberg because it really has that family unit thing.
Mhm.
The family unit is being threatened by a magical or scientific
Mhm.
outside force. That's every Steven Spielberg movie. And so
Mhm.
that's, really what I wanted to do here is write something that I can read and
Mhm.
enjoy as an adult, that my kids can read and
Yes.
enjoy, and that moms can read and enjoy.
Yes.
Moms don't always come out well in comic books.
Mhm.
They're always either dying to give somebody a backstory,
Mhm.
or, they just kind of are in the background wringing their hands going, be safe this time,
Yeah. Mhm.
to their kid as they go out, they fly out in their superhero outfit to
Mhm.
save the day. I wanted to write a mom superhero
Mhm.
where this is a parent who, she's packing up her entire life in a motel
Yeah.
room to throw it in the car to go. But she also has to tell the children, like,
Mhm.
we will listen to like, one of the first things she said to the kids is, okay, the first kid to have all their stuff packed gets to
Yes.
pick the audio in the car.
Yeah.
And so she's got to be parenting on the
Mhm.
fly as all of this is happening, as their life is falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to write that. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
write a mom who doesn't have any like superpowers. She's got
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of
Yes.
training from the military, but she's not, flying or
Mm-hmm.
shooting things out of her hands or something. She's just like a person who
Yes.
is
Yeah.
saving the day that way. And I really love that about Tess. I want to be Tess when I grow
Mm-hmm.
up. Um, I don't think it's in the cards, but I loved writing a mom who
Mm-hmm.
has her own adventure and has her own like mystery to solve while this is all happening around her.
The main thing I love about Tess, and like you said, you want to write her as a person, is that the dialogue is real. Because that's
Thank
the thing
you.
I love the hotel story. Because, like you said, it's like, it's not just for comic book readers, but you're kind of hoping that, a mother who probably like read some comics, this is
Hmm.
something she could pick up and read. And
Yeah.
if she reads the dialogue, it's like, oh my God, this is what I did, this is what I
Yeah.
told my, my, when we had to leave Disneyland, and we have our flight to catch in 5 hours, and none of the
Yep.
kids have packed anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my husband's, well, I'm not, I'm just making fun, my husband's out doing something, or he's trying to settle everything else, and and also what I love too is that the dialogue with the twins is genuine.
Yeah.
The thing I
Yeah.
love, you know, and like,
Um,
mhm,
and I think if that dialogue is any good, it's because I have two children who are both on the autism spectrum,
mhm,
and they have gotten me thinking about how kids talk to each other in ways
mhm,
that I never would have considered before.
mhm,
I spend a lot of my life sort of helping interpret the world to my kids in a way they
mhm,
can understand, but also helping interpret my kids to the world in a
yeah,
way that they can understand. Because the way that my kids talk is very blunt.
mhm,
And it's very like they don't understand small talk, they don't believe
mhm,
in it. They don't like if they don't like what grandma made for dinner, why
mhm,
wouldn't they just say, I don't like what you made for dinner?
mhm,
They don't understand these social layers.
mhm,
And so when I'm writing the kids, I'm just kind of thinking a lot about, all right, what would this look like really blunt? Because
mhm,
Liam, one of the two twins, he
yeah,
is he is a very literal, blunt thinker.
mhm,
And then there's Audrey, who is like the wild card. Like
yeah,
she is the one who you can tell is just like in her mind, she is King Arthur in armor, like
mhm,
fighting
yeah,
monsters with a
yes,
broadsword. And you also kind of worry because if that kid saw a broadsword, she would pick it up and be
yeah,
trying something. Like she is just the wild card.
mhm,
Um, so like the interactions between the kids are
mhm.
so fun to write because it's me kind of using these ideas that I've been thinking about for my whole time as a mom,
Mhm.
when it comes to how kids communicate.
Melissa, I'm gonna start wrapping things up because I'm
Sure.
realizing, oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna jump to what is your next convention appearance for either the rest of this year or at the beginning of 2025?
So I'm pretty locked into San Diego and San Diego Comic-Con and Dragon Con. I'm
Okay,
guessing those are going to be my 2025 appearances.
yeah.
I have started taking my kids to there's a tiny little convention at UW Platteville, which is an hour away from us, and it
Hmm.
is about, I don't know, 200 people
Oh
that
no,
come
yeah,
there as opposed to the 80,000 at
yeah.
Dragon Con.
Hmm.
And it is something I've been doing not as a writer or a
Hmm.
professional, but as a mom. I
Hmm.
I started taking them and letting them dip a toe in cosplay and
Oh yeah.
gaming and panels. And my 11-year-old, all she wants to do is shop the like booths. Like she bought like 4 stuffed animals last year
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
that's what she loves. So in addition, like the only appearances I know of so far are San Diego and DragaCon in
Mhm.
2025, but I'm also beginning to start taking kids as a mom
Yeah,
to con, so that's fun too.
that's pretty cool. All right. Have you and your family been to Hawaii?
Yes. Yes, I
Oh,
love Hawaii. My parents, when I was a kid, I have three sisters, and
mm-hmm,
my parents worked really, really hard and saved up, and they took us to Hawaii when I was a kid. We
mm-hmm.
went to the Big Island and we went to Maui. I've survived the road to Hana.
Yes.
Uh, I was the only member of my family, I think, who didn't throw up on the road to Hana, although it was close on the way
Mm-hmm,
home or on the way
mm-hmm.
back down.
Yeah.
And when a few years ago, when I was still married, my husband and I went as kind of our delayed honeymoon.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Waikiki, to a convention. I don't
Mm.
do vacations. I go to conventions or research trips.
Uh-huh.
But the following year, there was a convention, and so we saved and we went back with my kids. So, my two daughters
Mm-hmm.
have been to Hawaii, and they were little, but they have memories of like
That's good.
waking up at 5 a.m., 4:30 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a picture of them in the hotel room at 4:30 in the morning, Hawaii time,
Mm-hmm.
where they are fully dressed and like
Yeah.
they have sunscreen and
Mm-hmm.
hats on, and they're
Yeah.
like, let's go. Like
Yeah.
we heard there's a beach. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
No idea that it would be dark for like 2 more hours.
No, no.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think Hawaii is an incredible place, and I really enjoyed John Oliver did a recent piece on Hawaii that really opened my eyes to some of the
Mm-hmm.
evolving situations there
Yes.
that I think are, so important
Mm-hmm.
conversations to be having. So it's a place that's definitely in my heart.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I do hope to go back someday. My dream is to visit Kauai where they filmed Jurassic Park.
Oh, yes.
Because
Yeah.
most of it was filmed there. There was
Yes.
one little scene, the Gallimimus
Yes.
being attacked by the T-Rex. That was filmed in just outside Waikiki, I think. But everything else was on Kauai. So that someday
Mm-hmm.
that's my dream, is to go see those locations.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna correct you.
Oh,
That scene
please,
that you
please do.
it's not just outside, it's way outside of Waikiki.
Oh,
It's a
you're right.
cool little ranch across. Yeah,
Yeah, the ranch. We did the
cool
tour
little.
at the ranch. You have to understand, in Wisconsin, you
Mhm,
can drive, like I drive for 3 hours to
mhm,
visit my parents, and I'm still in, nowhere near the borders of Wisconsin.
mhm.
I think I'm used to a different scale, but you're right. They're not that
Yeah, I'm
close.
sorry. I'm sorry.
They're not that close. But I did enjoy taking the tour of the studio that they have there.
I'm sorry. I just don't want listeners to come to Waikiki go, wait a minute. Is that the place where Melissa's talking about by Diamond Head? Wait, we see that
You
park.
can visit both, but you
Yeah.
do need to like have a vehicle. It's not a walking distance kind of deal. You're
I'm
right.
sorry, Melissa. I don't. I'm
No,
sorry.
that is very good. You are the
But
expert.
no, but you're right. The thing is too that because we're on an island and it's like and you live on the mainland and it's like you said, 3 hours, to drive to your parents' house.
Mhm.
E- e- But for us, it's like, it's
So,
all different.
yeah.
It's all perspectives.
If you had no traffic at all, how long would it take you to drive to like the whole length of the island, do you think? No traffic. I know traffic is a thing.
Anyway, I would say I'm this just a rough thing, but probably an hour.
Oh, wow.
Just
Yeah.
yeah.
I
I'm
can't
sorry.
drive to the other, like I can drive to the other side of Madison in an hour. Like
Yeah, but yeah, I
that
would say
you're right. It's such a different scale, isn't it?
yes. Okay, all right. Okay. So last question. Any closing words to our listeners?
Closing words to our listeners. No, not really. I never know what to say when I'm promoting things, because I do want you to read my book, but
Yes.
also, I want you to read anything, and I
Mhm.
want you to review it and talk about it. This is not a great time for authors. We are being besieged
Yes.
by things like piracy and a very shrinking publishing industry that is publishing fewer and fewer books.
Hmm.
Um, Things are not good for your local writer right now.
Hmm.
So read anything,
Hmm.
don't pirate books,
Hmm.
use the library,
Yeah.
and like leave a review if you love something, because people, that means a lot to us.
Mhm.
More than you would think. a good review can really make somebody's day.
Melissa, mahalo. Thank you in Hawaiian for your time. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to interview you. And again, thank you very much for your time. I know we went over an hour. Oh my God.
Oh, that's okay. I
So-
love talking about my work, and it was very nice to chat with you about it. So happy to talk to somebody who's read it, so I can actually get into the specifics.
Oh, thank you very much. And I want to thank you for making comics. Oh, like I said, I read the first issue. You know, it piqued my interest. I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. You know, I'm being honest about that.
Oh, thank you.
I wish you all the success with uh oh shoot, my mind went blank. Archaic. Yes, your comics.
Yeah.
And sorry, listeners, I'm going to tell this dumb story to Melissa that I already told Melissa. When I saw the title Archaic, I've heard the word of archaic so many times, I've never realized how it was spelled.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that, by the way, that title was the hardest part of writing this entire book, because when I was submitting this to publishers, the name was Island of Dead Legends. And I liked that name, but there was already a comic called Dead Legends.
Yes.
And then Ahoy itself has like 2 different comics with the word island in it. So we spent months and months back and forth trying to find something. And I had like lists and lists of like random words that I was putting together. Like I was, Archaic Island or whatever. And then it wasn't till like June or July of this year that I was like, what about Archaic? And then the next day there was a press release that said Archaic.
But I'm going to say, no.
So it's the perfect name that took a very stupid amount of time for me to get around to.
But I'm going to say, but it's fitting for the series that you've already laid out. It really is. So I want to thank Hannah, of Superfan Promotions for setting up this interview and for providing me with an advanced reading copy. If you are a new comic book reader or a lifelong comic book reader who loves good mysteries and action adventure stories, please check out Archaic. The first issue of this 5-part series comes out on December 4th, and issue 2 comes out on January 8th of 2025. Now, Melissa, this part, I am being serious. Listeners, if you know a friend or a family member who loves independent comics, who loves, like what we talk about, these old legends about urban monsters or forgotten gods, and you love a mystery, please, pick up Archaic #1, and also pick up some Ahoy trading comics, such as Blacksmith, Project Cryptid Volume 1, and give it to your friend or family member as a Christmas present or a like a Christmas or a birthday gift bundle. That'd be so cool. It's kind of like when we were little kids, just sharing comics when we were young. Yeah.
So the first issue of Archaic actually comes out December 4th. And so it makes a wonderful Christmas present. Let me tell you. Give it to everybody. It's like roll it into a tube, it slides right into the stocking. It'll be great.
Oh, I know you're kind of, but that's perfect. That's
right?
perfect.
Yeah. That should be a thing. Yeah.
That's perfect. I want to thank Drew, the host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. And Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. Now, if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listener. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys, aloha.
Aloha.
Are you missing 6-man co-host Mike Myers? Well, you don't have to. Go to dcnoisepodcast.com and explore all of Mike's podcast universe, including my favorite, Mike M's Weekly Reads, to stay up to date with Mike's personal reading list. You got Geek Brunch, a bi-weekly celebration of geek culture with Mike and Bill Bomer, where they dish about comics, movies, TVs, and even food sometimes. You got DC Noise, focusing on Mike's favorite publisher, DC. Collector's Corner, DC Everything Else, another favorite of mine, and Geek Brunch Retro. So feel free to go find Mike at dcnoisepodcast.com.